Hi, I'm Jillian Sidoti, and tonight I'm going to talk about how to
Oh,
legally crowdfund your businesses.
okay. Oh, and I'm going to say welcome to the Real Estate Financing and Crowdfunding Network's July meetup. We're sponsored by the Washington, D.C. Homes Brokerage, a unique investor friendly D.C. area brokerage. And thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm one of the organizers and an associate with Washington, D.C. Homes. Tonight we have a special guest, Miss Jillian. She is one of the country's leading experts on Regulation A+. Since 2008, Jillian has submitted multiple Regulation A offering circulars to the Securities Exchange Commission for approval, making her one of the few attorneys familiar with the law prior to the changes under the Jobs Act. Since the Jobs Act, Jillian has assisted multiple companies and entrepreneurs realize their fundraising goals through crowdfunding, 506C, and Regulation A. Jillian also continues to specialize in transactional legal matters such as private placement memorandums, S1s and S11s, and Regulation D filings. Jillian also spends her time speaking at seminars, educating real estate investors on how to legally raise capital for their real estate investment projects. She's the author of the highly rated book, The Crowdfunding Myth, which debunks the multiple myths surrounding crowdfunding and teaches the reader how to effectively crowdfund their securities offering. We are thrilled to have her here tonight to discuss how to conduct a crowdfunding campaign. Before I hand over to Jillian, I ask that everyone please mute their microphones so we don't have any background noise. If you have a question during the presentation, please submit it through the chat function. We will have a Q&A period at the end of the event. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jillian.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm really happy that you're joining us to learn about the legal ramifications and how to do a crowdfund legally. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is understanding how we got here. And a lot of times, what I'll hear people say is, well, why do I need to know that? Because that's why I hire a securities attorney. But it's important to know so that you understand how we got here in the first place. How did we get to the wonderful world of crowdfunding? So it started off with the Great Depression. And when the stock market crashed and everything fell apart, FDR came out with the New Deal in 1933. And part of that New Deal was what I call the Mac Daddy of securities law, which is the securities law of 1933, which is still good law today. It's like the federal umbrella law for all securities laws. And then fast forward to 1946, and there was a company called the W.J. Howe Company. And we're going to get to that in a little bit. And it's important to understand the W.J. Howe Company because that helps us really understand why these laws are in place and why they apply to the offers of securities or investment opportunities. In 2012, the Jobs Act passed, and that is the crowdfunding law. It doesn't make much sense because it's called the Jobs Act, but that's really where crowdfunding was created. It stands for the Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act, and it had several things in it that made it easier to crowdfund your deals. So in 2015, we saw Regulation A+ become legal because of the Jobs Act. Then the SEC came out with the rules for Regulation A+. And then in 2016, we saw crowdfunding become completely legal. And we're going to talk about what that really means in a legal sense, because we hear the word crowdfund all the time. But there's a lot of misuse of the word in a legal sense, because crowdfunding can mean to some people, like, how many times do I hear or you hear out there that crowdfunding is like GoFundMe? Well, that's not true. GoFundMe is a donation model. That's where people go online and ask for donations for, their sick cat or what have you. Or we hear that crowdfunding is Kickstarter. And to some extent that is true. People are coming to a crowd. Part of the crowd is coming together to finance a company, but instead of getting stock or bonds or some kind of interest in the company, what a person who crowdfund something on Kickstarter or Indiegogo gets is a product or the promise of, a bumper sticker or a t-shirt, or the promise of some future service or some future product. And there is no return on investment. It's literally you're pre-buying a product, generally speaking. Or like if it's a film, a lot of times what we'll see on Kickstarter or Indiegogo is that you'll get a producer credit, or you'll get a walk-on role for your donation into the company. So let's talk about what this means to us. And I had said earlier that I was going to talk about the Securities Act of 1933 and how it relates to the W.J. Howe case in 1946. And the W.J. Howe Company was a farm, and it subdivided itself into 1-acre parcels. And it sold those 1-acre parcels to individual investors. And those individual investors bought the parcels of land with the following caveats. You buy this land, and we, the W.J. Howe Company, are going to continue to farm the land for you, and we're going to send you the profits at the end of our tenure, or at the end of the farming season. Not tenure, I don't know why I picked that word. But at the end of the farming season, we're going to sell all the oranges that are on the land, and we're going to send you your share of the profits from the sale of those oranges. Well, it didn't work out. Everybody lost their shirt, if you will, and the investors who purchased the land were very upset and sued this W.J. Howe Company on the basis of fraud. W.J. Howe, however, said, well, I didn't commit fraud or we didn't commit fraud because we sold you a piece of land. We didn't sell you a security. You didn't get stock. You didn't get interest in the W.J. Howe Company. You purchased a piece of land. And the Supreme Court disagreed with the W.J. Howe Company and sided with the investors. And that case, what came out of that case is a rule and a test that is good today. And that's why it's so important to mention it. Because if you're ever in a bind and you're not sure, am I offering a security or if I'm offering something else, you can always go to this test. And if you're writing anything down, for sure, write this down. So number one, there is an investment of money. So the investors in the W.J. Howe Company did invest money. They invested money to purchase plots of land in a common enterprise. In other words, there was more than one investor. And yes, there was more than one investor that invested in the W.J. Howe Company's plots of land. Number three, there was an expectation of profits. Yes, all the investors expected to gain profits from the sale of the oranges. And profits can mean anything. It really means like return on investment to the investor. So for example, if you write a note and that note has interest, the investor is expecting a return on investment for that note in the way of interest, and that is their profits. And then finally, through the efforts of a promoter, which means that you, the issuer or the company or the entity or the business, are doing all the work. You're not saying to your investors, hey, thanks for your money, now come along, you're going to be part of the executive team. Your investors are passive. And the investors in the W.J. Howe Company or in the W.J. Howe Company plots of land were also passive. And so that was through the efforts of a promoter. So there is an investment of money. There's more than one investor. Everyone expects profits and somebody else is doing all the work. Then you have a security, and the laws that we're about to talk about will apply. So let's talk real quick about the different types of investors under the law. There's 3 different types of investors. And by the way, forgive me if you find this slide to be somewhat offensive in the way I put it out, but it's a great way to help you remember what's what. So we refer to our lowest common denominator investor, not so smart and not so rich. And the reason why I kind of apologize for this slide is because actually 97%, depending on which statistics you look at, 97% of all investors out there today in the United States are unaccredited. Which leads us to 3% of the population, number 1 type of investor, accredited investors. And accredited investors are those individuals who make $200,000 a year, or those married couples that make $300,000 a year as a married couple, or the individual investor or married couple has a net worth of $1 million exclusive of their primary residence. That's 3% of the population. So let's go back to that 97% of the population are unaccredited investors. Of that 97% of the population, a certain percentage, and we can't really know, what percentage is of this type because there's no really good statistics on it. People can become our number 2 investor, which is a sophisticated investor. So what do I mean by people can become a sophisticated investor? They can get educated, they can start investing, they can get some experience, and that in itself will make them a sophisticated investor. And so our sophisticated investors are considered smart, but not so rich. So in other words, they understand the risks associated with investing and can appreciate those risks, but perhaps don't have the income or the net worth of an accredited investor. So let's continue on. So I spoke earlier that the Jobs Act has, several different sections that make crowdfunding easier. And here are the basic buckets, if you will. I call them buckets. The basic buckets that you can fit into when you're out there trying to raise capital. So our first bucket is Regulation CF, or crowdfunding. And it allows you to raise up to $1 million, and that says $1 million there, but it's actually $1,070,000 on a registered crowdfunding platform. And we're gonna get into this a little more of another slide about this. But it allows you to raise $1,070,000 for your business on a registered crowdfunding platform. But it is highly restrictive in terms of what you can take from investors. For example, you can take no more than 10% or 10% or $10,000, 10% of an individual's net worth, or $10,000, whichever is less. Now, that rule actually doesn't apply to accredited investors. From accredited investors, you can take as much as an accredited investor actually wants to invest. But every other investor, the 97%, can only invest $10,000 or 10% of their net worth, whichever is less. Our next bucket is 506B. And 506B is the old rule, still a good rule. And funny enough, of all the Regulation D filings that are done, and if we think about the Securities Act of 1933 as a big tree, remember I said that's the Mac Daddy of securities laws. So all these laws right here are actually under the Securities Act of 1933. If we think about that as a big tree, we have 3 branches on that tree. And those 3 branches are Reg CF, Reg A, and Reg D. Reg CF is our crowdfunding, which is on my left side of the screen. I don't know how it appears to you, is crowdfunding. And then Reg D has 2 twigs that shoot off to it, 506B and 506C. And then we have Reg A, which is another branch, which is our mini IPO, and that's on the right-hand side. So let's talk about those 2 twigs in the middle, the 506B and 506C. So 506B, which is under Regulation D, again, is the old rule. It means you cannot advertise for investors. And what does that mean? It means you can't go out on the internet and say, hey, I'm looking for investors. You can only raise money from those you have a substantive pre-existing relationship with. And you are allowed to use both sophisticated investors, so that's our number 2 type of investor, and accredited investor. Purely unaccredited investors are not allowed. Under 506C, however, we are allowed to do general solicitation. But the big but with that is that we can only take in accredited investors. So that's our number 1 type of investor. So you can crowdfund under 506C. And what do I mean by that? You can go on the internet and you can raise money. You cannot under 506B because you can't do general solicitation. The funny thing is, though, that since the Jobs Act passed, 93% of the Regulation D filings, as reported on the SEC system, are actually under 506B, which means 506C is still widely unused. So Then let's look at our mini IPO, another great way to crowdfund. So our mini IPO is the new Regulation A offering, which allows us to raise up to $50 million from any investor. So our one investor or two or three investor. And it allows us to do general solicitation, go on the internet, raise money from anywhere. It's really great, flexible rule. The big but on that one is that you do have to get permission from the Securities Exchange Commission prior to doing that. And so that can be a little costly. And so it's probably not the best thing for you to start off with if you're starting off your crowdfunding venture. So let's talk about, again, where can you advertise? Where can you truly crowdfund from? You can crowdfund under 506C, accredited investors only, no permission needed from the SEC, don't have to do anything fancy, but you can only take accredited investors. Regulation A, where you can raise money from anybody, anywhere, but you do have to get permission from the SEC first. And then finally, Regulation CF, Regulation Crowdfunding, which allows you to go to a registered crowdfunding portal and raise up to $1,070,000 from investors, and you can raise money from any type of investor there. So if you're taking pictures or notes or whatever, this is a neat little chart that just helps you kind of organize it in your mind. I'll give you a quick second to look at that, or if you can screenshot it, go ahead. I encourage you to do that, screenshot away. And I will move on to our next slide, which is going to talk about crowdfunding through a portal. Now, this is pure, true, legal sense crowdfunding. You're allowed to raise up to $1,070,000. What is your legal obligation? What do you have to disclose to investors? Well, it's this thing called a Form C, a Form C. And if you want to Google search, you can pull up the PDF version of the Form C. But most crowdfunding portals will have it built into their system. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're going to start a crowdfunding campaign on a registered crowdfunding portal, what you're going to do is you're going to start, and they're going to actually give you a form that will pre-fill the Form C for you. So it's nice that a lot of these portals have thought of that in advance. So what's necessary? So you have to disclose all the risks. You have to tell them what the investors are going to get. You have to tell them what your business plan is. You have to tell them what your capitalization plan is. So there is quite a bit of planning, but that's true for any securities offering. Anytime you're taking investors in, it's really important to disclose all the material facts, details, and disclaim any liabilities so that you make sure that the investor is fully informed prior to making an investment. So you file that Form C. And the other thing that you're going to have to do, and this is kind of a pain in the butt, but it's absolutely necessary, is that you got to get an audit done if you're raising more than $107,000. And finally, you can only take advantage of this particular law if you're doing it through a registered crowdfunding portal. And if you want to find out what registered crowdfunding portals there are out there, just go to finra.org and you can find whatever you need. Okay, so moving on, I want to talk about Regulation A. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, and then I'll take some questions from you if you want to ask any. Regulation A pluses are all the rage. They're the mini IPOs. It's another way to do crowdfunding, and it allows you to raise up to $50 million from any investor. So here's the difference. We have Reg CF over here. You just got to find a platform that will take you. You got to get your Form C done. There's very little in terms of approval process. It's really just approval from the platform that you elect to go on itself, because they have to do their due diligence. So the legal costs are relatively inexpensive, but you can only raise $1,070,000, and your investors are restricted in how much they can invest. So that's Reg CF over here. And then we have Reg A over here, where the legal costs are a lot more expensive. You do have to wait till you get approval from the SEC, but you don't have to go to a portal to raise this money. You can raise this money anywhere, anytime, on the internet, off the internet. You can use general solicitation. You can pull a billboard on the side of the road. Whereas with Reg CF, you can't do that. Reg CF, you can advertise your securities, but only to the extent that they're on the crowdfunding platform. So what do I mean? the only place you can advertise your securities is on the registered crowdfunding portal. Everything has to lead back to the portal. So it's kind of, it's a little more restrictive, whereas with Reg A isn't so restrictive, but we do have, higher legal fees, and we do need to get approval from the SEC. So what do you want to do if you're going to do a Reg A? Or, actually, this really applies to any offering, whether it's Reg A, 506C, 506B, or Regulation CF. This applies to any offering. The first thing you want to work on is your marketing, because if you have no way to raise the money, there's no reason to get any of these legal documents done. Now, at the same time, I'm going to tell you, you will raise more money if you are legally compliant. I see it happen all the time where somebody will come to me and they will have messy documents, or they'll have no documents, and they'll want to get it right. And they have some investors, but they still want to get it right and make sure that they're giving their investors the proper information. And so we'll put it all together, and like by some miracle, they'll start raising more money faster. And it's because people like it. Investors like it when you take the time to do it right. So I want to really encourage you to do it right. Don't try to shortcut legal documents when it comes to investors' money, because you are taking people's retirements, people's investment money. They are relying on you to do the right thing by them. So start by doing the right thing by them, by getting proper legal documentation and informing them of all the risks associated with investing. But back to marketing. So you want to start on your marketing, then move on to your legal requirements. And so the step one is to put your offering together. And this goes for even though we have this as Reg A, this really goes for anything. So put your offering together, hire a securities attorney. Even with a Form C, I completely recommend getting a securities attorney to help you put together the proper risk factors. And then you can go out and it's called testing the waters, and test to see if anybody's interested in your offer. Then the other part you're going to need to do for both Reg CF, if you're raising more than $107,000, and Tier 2 Regulation A+, is you want to find an auditor to audit your books. And a lot of times people say to me, but we don't have any activity, what are you auditing? Well, the answer is they're auditing nothing, but you're going to pay them $2,500 to say they just audited nothing, unfortunately. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. Under Reg CF, you're going to submit to the crowdfunding platform. Under Reg A, you're going to submit to the SEC, and then you have to wait approximately 27 days from the SEC. Not so much with the crowdfunding portal, but with the SEC, you have to wait 27 days, because what they're going to do is come back with comments. What the crowdfunding portal will also do is come back with comments. They're just not going to take 27 days. And then you're going to want to review and answer those comments and make sure that you're doing everything properly, at which time you'll be cleared. You'll get going, and you'll start going out and start raising capital. And so I have this little video I'd like to share. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it to play. I always have issues with it. But this video, oh, no, it's not working. But this was just a good example on how to basically do marketing right. I just love this video. So if you are out there and you want to find it online, there it went away. I don't know what to do with that. But if you want to find that video online, it's called The Fair Hair Dumbbell. It's on YouTube. It's called The Fair Hair Dumbbell. Check it out. It's super funny, really entertaining, but very educational and very effective when it comes to raising money from investors. So I strongly encourage you to check that out as an example of good marketing for crowdfunding. And with that, I don't know if we have any questions, but my contact information is up here if you want to get in contact with me.
And this is Elizabeth again. You can also, if anyone is finding you cannot speak, it's because I muted everybody's microphone, but you can unmute it now if you like, if you have any question, or type into the chat box. Otherwise, if anybody can come up with a question later, then you're free to email us. You can email me info@chestnutstpartners.com. That's info@chestnutstreetpartners.com, but the street is abbreviated to ST. And I can forward any questions to Jillian. And here's contact information as well.
Okay. I have a question. It's the ubiquitous question, which is, how much would is it a Reg A?
Yes.
Regulation A filing be the legal end of it? How much would that be?
To be perfectly frank with you, the legal costs are $50,000. But I tell everybody you've got to budget at least $75,000. And the reason why is because you have an audit cost. I want you to hire a what's called a transfer agent so that we avoid certain other complications if we don't have the transfer agent. I want you to have enough money to put your technology together. And I will tell you that, like, my bigger clients who've been very successful have spent about $100,000 just with legal, audit, technology, because and we recently did an offering for a company called Tulsa Real Estate Fund, and they put all of these things in place, and they spent a lot of money and a lot of time on making sure their technology was completely in place and ready to go so that they didn't violate anything.
Okay.
And Jillian, we have a question. When creating a syndication, what would be the best way to go for multifamily investing?
Oh, that's a great question. So normally what we recommend is either a 506B or a 506C, and you're going to create an LLC. And then the LLC will be managed by another LLC. That's where you as the manager will reside. So you and any partners you have that will participate in management will be in the management LLC, which will then manage the syndication LLC. The syndication LLC will own the property, and that syndication LLC will do a securities offering under 506B as in boy or 506C as in Charlie. For anybody who ever wants to do real estate from a Regulation A perspective, for example, I never recommend that you have a specific property already identified, because you are at the mercy of the SEC and their review. So you always want to do a fund model whenever you're doing a Regulation A. So for example, I have a lot of real estate funds that are under Regulation A, but they're all funds that say, hey, we don't have any properties. We know what kind of properties we want, but we don't have a specific one. So if you're doing a specific syndication, you've got the multifamily property already identified, then that's the one. That's the way you want to go, is 506B or C. And, it's funny you ask that specific question, because our firm specializes in multifamily syndications. Both my partner and I are CCIMs, and he actually 100% of his practice, my partner's practice, is multifamily syndications.
And there was a follow-up question. How much will that cost?
That depends. That one's not as clear cut as a Reg A. We just charge $50,000 no matter what you're doing under Reg A, because the SEC is always a wild card. But with the Reg Ds, those are 506 Bs and Cs, the costs range between about 10 and 15,000. Our average client pays about 12,500, and that's from beginning to end. That's entity formation, PPM, operating agreement, subscription agreement, filing your Form Ds, and 6 months of ongoing legal support to make sure that your website's compliant and all that other good stuff.
Perfect.
Great. Does anyone have any other questions? Again, if you're finding you can't use your microphone, feel free to type into the group chat. Okay, well, if we are done with the questions section, then I can thank Jillian very much for joining us and sharing her expertise. And if anyone can think of any questions, of course, feel free to email me or Jillian after. Oh, I see we have one more question coming in. Says, I'm an accredited investor considering investing in a PPM fund. I'm looking for someone to do due diligence on the PPM. Can you recommend someone to review the PPM?
Yeah, yes, I can. What kind of PPM is it? You're saying it's a fund. Is it a real estate fund?
I can, Chris, you're unmuted now if you wanted to speak.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah, hi. It is a mobile home park investing fund. The guy's name is Kevin Bupp.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard of Kevin. I actually did I think his radio program once. Yeah, if you want to send it on over to me, I'll take a look at it. I won't act as like legal counsel because I don't really do that, but I can give it a quick cursory review and try to introduce you to somebody who can help you out.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you very much. I will do that.
And I'm typing Jillian's email into the chat so everyone has it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Okay, then if that is it, thank you so much, Jillian. And
you're welcome.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing everybody next month. We have a crowdfunding meetup each month. Many of them are online, although we do have a quarterly in-person meetup, and you can stay tuned to the meetup group for more information. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jillian.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Bye, guys.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Good evening.